Welcome to the July the 23rd, 1991 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you our history tape number 151 and bring you a very exciting couple that has lived in Grand Prairie for quite some number of years, has been responsible for a lot of history, and is continually making history in our great city. And we're very delighted to welcome Mr. and Mrs. Johnny Jinks. Mr. Johnny Jinks, welcome to the set.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Ruthie.
Wonderful. And Vera Jinks, how wonderful to have you back on the set.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Great. You've been on this dais with us several times in other capacities, wearing other hats. Today, we'd like to make a history tape of the Jinks family. We'd like to begin with you, Mr. Johnny Jinks, and have you look out into your camera and give us a little bit about your genealogy, giving us your parents' names and whatever you'd like to say about the folks.
Well, my parents' names, Ruthie, were William Garrett Jinks and Mary Edna McCullough Jinks. I had lived in various parts of Texas prior to coming to Grand Prairie. I was actually born in Quanah, Texas, up in northwest Texas, and later attended school in Wichita Falls and then in Lubbock for a while, and we moved, then the family moved to Arlington. I finished high school in Arlington and went to UTA and finished my degree there at UTA, and Vera and I met at Denton while she was at school at North Texas there, and we decided to get married, and then we lived in Arlington for a short time, then moved to Grand Prairie, and here we've been ever since.
Oh, that just sounds wonderful. Now, let's get back to the real Johnny Jinks, born in Quanah, Texas. That's up in the Panhandle. What were your folks doing in that area, Johnny Jinks?
My dad had always been in the farming and ranching business.
All right.
And so that's my early childhood was spent in a rural environment, and I had the advantages of having plenty of open space, a horse and a dog, and lots of room to play, and those are fond memories, naturally.
All right, now growing up in that environment, did Johnny ever have any farm chores to do? Did you ever have anything to do like that, or did you have other outside interests?
Oh yes, I had varied farm chores to do.
Yeah.
I was the youngest of three boys, Ruthie.
All right.
And so there not being any girls in the family, I also had housework to do. And I still remember dusting the furniture and helping my mother do the washing and things like that that you have to do in a rural livelihood. And so I had a varied amount of chores, both working with my father and my mother.
How did Johnny get to school?
Well, I rode a school bus.
Oh, well, great.
And we would walk about, I guess a quarter of a mile each morning and catch that school bus and ride to school. And of course, you have memories attached to that also. So, but when we moved to Arlington, I no longer rode a school bus. We were close to school.
And when you moved to Arlington, what brought your dad to Arlington? What did he do for a living then?
He was still in the farming and ranching business.
Still farming and ranching. All right, now, you mentioned that you had two older brothers. Would you like to name drop and tell us a little bit about them and where they are now, or put them on this history tape?
Well, both brothers live in this area. Richard lives in Mansfield, Texas, and Billy lives in Arlington, Texas.
Okay. And those two young men, are they in private enterprise such as you are? What do they do for a living?
Yes, they're both in private enterprise.
Oh, that is wonderful. All right, now, going to school, you have mentioned Quanah, Wichita Falls, Lubbock, and finally Arlington. How old were you when you started to school? Was that in the Quanah area when you started to school?
No.
First grade? Where was first grade?
First grade was in a little school right outside Wichita Falls called Freeburg.
Freeburg, that's a good name. And what county is Freeburg in?
It's in Wichita County.
Okay. All right, now was Freeburg a great big school, or a 6th grade school, or 11th grade school? Tell me about that.
Ruthie,
there was... A county school?
It was probably a county school.
All right.
I'm not real sure how the organization of that little school district was, but it was a one-building school, one floor, and as I recall, it had about 8 classrooms, and you went through, I believe, the 5th or 6th grade there, and then you were transferred into Wichita Falls. I attended Freeburg for the first 3 grades.
1 through 3. Okay.
And that was at a time, if you were in the upper level of your class, you skipped the 4th grade. And I skipped the 4th grade, so I went from 3rd grade to the 5th grade, and I never took the 4th grade.
That's very exciting.
And then I went to Wichita Falls school there for about a year and a half, and then my parents moved to Lubbock, Texas, and I finished my elementary grades and junior high grades there, and then moved to Arlington, Texas, and did my high school grades.
All right, and what was your graduating class with Arlington High? You remember that, what year you graduated?
1950.
1950, that was a good round year. But now, in all of these places like Freeburg and Wichita Falls and Lubbock, was there ever a special person or a teacher or a principal or a coach or anything that really encouraged Johnny Jinks and said, Johnny, you can do anything you want to do and all of this good stuff?
Well, I recall my first grade teacher, and I suppose that most people always recall their first teacher. As I recall, she was a bright, red-headed lady, very forceful, and she wanted us to always sit up straight. You always paid attention. She was a very strict disciplinarian, but a very kind teacher. And so I remember Mrs. Madole was her name. And I remember her. I remember Mr. Martin, who is the past superintendent of schools in Arlington.
Yes.
Mr. Martin and I had, he was my principal when I was in high school. And he was a person whom I had a lot of respect for and held in high regard. And then I had an English teacher that also, Mrs. Hughes, that was very special, as well as Mrs. Owsley, who was my social studies teacher, and she was also my homeroom teacher and was responsible for us going on a senior trip to New Orleans on a train.
Oh, wonderful.
The first time that had ever happened in Arlington High School, and we went to New Orleans on a chartered train and for our senior trip. And that was a pleasurable remembrance.
All right, we're going to leave you at the college level at the beginning of that because after that's where you met Vera. But now, Vera, let's establish your genealogy. Why don't you look out into your camera and tell us about your family? Would you do that? Your mother and daddy and et cetera.
Okay. My dad was Olin Cox, and my mother was Willie Leona Cox. And I had 2 brothers, Olin Cox Jr. and Billy Cox.
All right.
And I didn't have any sisters.
No sisters. All right, now your 2 brothers, are they still living, and if so, where?
My youngest brother is still alive, and he lives in Dallas now.
And he lives in Dallas. That's
Yes.
nice and close by, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
All right, now tell me about the Cox family, where you were born, when you were born, and anything you'd like to tell about your early childhood.
I was born in Big Spring, Texas, and as well as both my brothers were born out there, and we stayed there until I was fixing to start the 3rd grade.
Okay.
And so we moved to Grand Prairie because North American had opened that time during just at the beginning of the war, and my dad came here for a better job. He was a school teacher there, but he went to work at North American when we moved here.
All right.
And so that's what brought me to Grand Prairie.
All right, North American Aviation, a huge aircraft factory that was on the borderline of Grand Prairie, but was actually in Dallas. What did your dad do at the North American Aviation? Do you remember what he was in production, or what did he do?
He was in production at the plant.
All right. Well, did your mother work for a living?
Yes, my mother did work. My mother worked several places. She worked for Southwestern Bell Telephone Company, and then she worked for Sears, and then she retired and went to work for Watson's Department Store and worked there for many, many years.
All right. Now we have Vera coming to Grand Prairie, starting the 3rd grade. What school did you enter here in Grand Prairie, Texas? We'd like to name drop a little. Have a good Grand Prairie history, too.
Well, at that time, there was only one school in Grand Prairie. The grade school was downstairs, and the high school was upstairs. And the old school was located right next to where the administration building is now.
All right. Do you remember when you came to Grand Prairie into the 3rd grade, any of your teachers or making that big move all of the way from Big Spring to Grand Prairie, Texas?
I really don't remember what one. There was Miss Miller there, and I
Yes.
believe some of her descendants are still around here, very
Yes.
active here. But she's about the only one I can remember when I first started school in Grand Prairie.
All right. And then after going through the grade school, did you go to one of the middle schools or the junior highs?
Well, I went to Crockett in the old South Side School before I went to Grand Prairie High School.
Okay. They split you up after about the 4th or 5th grade?
That's right. That's right.
All right. And do you remember any teachers at Southside? That's
No.
that's
I can't
reaching
remember.
back a long
That's
way,
right.
isn't it, Vera?
I can't remember.
Okay, and then from Southside on to Grand Prairie High School?
That's
All
right.
Now let's talk about Grand Prairie High School back in the good old days, and what was your graduating class year?
I graduated in 1950 from Grand Prairie High School.
1950. All right, now tell me this. You remember the principal or some of the teachers that inspired you that said, Vera, you're the greatest?
Mr. Combs was the principal when I graduated. He was a real wonderful man.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher I liked very much, Mr. Garrison, that was the social studies teacher. And he kind of spurred me on, so I became a history major after that because he was so interesting.
Yes. All right, at Grand Prairie High School, as a gopher and a student, and really probably a scholar, were there any other special interests? Were you into debate, one-act play, or into the pep squad, or into the football games, or what were your interests then, Vera?
I liked the football games very much and basketball games. At that time, there was only, you didn't get to be cheerleader until you got to be a senior, so I looked forward all my 4 years to going out for cheerleader, and I was lucky enough to get to be cheerleader my senior year, so that was one of the highlights of my high school days.
You bet. That was wonderful. So in the magic year of 1950, you were a cheerleader, and one of the famous ones that have been cheerleaders and that are still residing here in Grand Prairie, Texas. I think you all ought to have a Grand Prairie Gopher cheerleader alumni of the ones that are just living in this town. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
That would be real nice.
Okay. After Grand Prairie High School, what happened to Vera then?
Well, right after high school, I went to North Texas for a while, and that's where I did meet Johnny, and I went to school. But Johnny and I got married, so I stayed home and worked.
Yes.
And then I raised my family, and then after my children graduated from college, I thought it was about time that if I ever was going to do it, I better go back to college and get my degree, which is what I did, and I graduated from UTA.
All right, and what was your major now that you've had this family and gone through all of these transitions? You started out in history. Did you end up in the history major?
I did. I had a double major, one in history and the other in political science.
And love that.
I did love it.
All right. Now, you're out of college, and you've before you get in the transition period, I need to know about this little darling family that's born to you, and I'm going to let you tell that because I'm afraid Johnny won't elaborate as much about children and grandchildren as you will. Would you name us your children and grandchildren, where they live, and anything you'd like to say about them, including the ones that are married and their spouses, and let's put this on the history record.
Okay, our oldest son, he lives down in Ennis, and he's a physician down there, and he has 2 children, Allison and Brian.
All
And
right.
then our youngest son, he lives in Arlington, and he has a 1-year little old baby girl.
Yes.
But he also works with Johnny in the electrical business. And then our daughter, she lives here in Grand Prairie, and she teaches history at Lee Middle School, and she's got 4-year-old twins, a little girl and a little boy.
And you didn't name her?
Oh, Terry, Terry Edwards is my daughter.
Yes. All right. And would you name the children?
Her children are Adam and Shannon.
All right.
And then the little granddaughter that lives in Arlington, her name is Laura.
All right. And the ones that live here in Grand Prairie, your grandchildren, do they go to school at a Grand Prairie school?
No, they're 4, and they're not going to school yet.
But pretty soon.
Yes, it won't be long.
It won't
That's
be
right.
long. That is wonderful. And Vera, you do work with Johnny in the business, right?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'm going to get back to Johnny, and let's talk about the electrical business. What ever possessed you to go into private enterprise in the electrical business, Mr. Johnny Jinks? Contracting and whatever else you do, and tell us a little bit about your business.
Ruthie, almost by chance and accident, really. I was working in LTV in the maintenance department there, in the electrical department. And then we had a layoff at LTV, and I did not have very much seniority. It was not LTV then, it was Temco Aircraft.
Oh, Temco, okay.
It was Temco Aircraft then, and so I was laid off, and I went to work for an electrical contractor, and worked for that electrical contractor for about 2.5 years.
Would you like to name that electrical contractor?
It was Heron Electric.
Okay, wonderful.
He was located in Grand Prairie and was doing a lot of work for the Syntex Construction Company at that time, who was responsible for building the Inglewood addition in Grand Prairie, as well as various other housing projects. I think a total of 5 major projects in the Dallas area. And that contractor closed his business, and he told me that I could have his phone number if I wanted it, that he no longer needed it. And so I picked up his phone number and declared myself in business, got my master's license, which was required to be an electrical contractor, and went in business at that time. And from that time on, that has been my principal endeavor, although I've dabbled in some real estate investments and other things along the way, naturally, but the electrical business has been very my livelihood principally.
All right, and your wonderful Jinks Electric is located on Northwest what?
24th Street.
Northwest 24th Street.
And Houston.
And Houston Street. So that pinpoints you into a very special part of Grand Prairie, Texas that has some, a little bit of light industrial and all the good stuff in it, and commercial. That's great that you have established a business and have spent so many long years here. And Johnny Jinks, not only have you done that, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about your service in the community since you have been elected to the City Council. I'd like for you to tell us if there are other boards and commissions, if you're in any clubs, and you're on a bank board that, or if you're not on a bank board, you were at one time. Tell us a little bit about that portion of your contribution to Grand Prairie.
Well, Ruthie, that's been a big part of my life in Grand Prairie. It's been something that I've enjoyed very much. I have served on the City Council from 1972 to 1976, and served on the hospital board from 1976, and I'm still on the Dallas-Fort Worth Healthcare Board there, serving in capacity as vice chairman. Served as chairman of the Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce, and served on its board of directors for I believe 5 years total. And I have enjoyed all of those activities very much. The association I've had with some very wonderful people. And as you know, Ruthie, the City Council is a very active thing, and I enjoyed the City Council work very much.
Okay. Serving on a bank board, and are you a member of any of the clubs like Rotary or Optimist or Lions or any of those clubs?
I am a member of the Rotary Club here.
Which
in
one,
Grand
the
Prairie.
Tuesday or the Friday?
I'm on the Friday Club.
You're in the Friday Rotary Club. Wow, wonderful. You've given so much time and so much effort in your community service area. We appreciate so very much what you've done, but we're going to get back with you in just a few minutes and let you tell us about maybe your dreams for Grand Prairie or something like that. But let's get back with Vera. All right, Vera, after raising these babies and going to college and all of this good stuff, what have you been doing with your life since you graduated from UTA?
Well, of course, I still work at the electrical company every day, and I have been in the women's division and been in the Grand Prairie Women's Club, and I've served many years on the board of the Miss Grand Prairie Scholarship Pageant and on over to Miss Texas Pageant.
As the main chaperone for Miss Grand Prairie for probably 10 years, you have had a lot of experience seeing the girls that are representing Grand Prairie. Were you by any chance the chief honcho when our Miss Grand Prairie became Miss Texas?
No, unfortunately, I was not that year. I had to have back surgery that year, so that was the one year I had to lay out when Stephanie won that
When
year.
Stephanie
Yes.
won Miss America, Miss
Yes, Miss
Texas.
Texas.
Miss Texas. And should have won Miss America.
That's right.
Right. She was such a talented
Yes,
young
she
lady.
is.
Beautiful.
She is.
Well, what is it like for a lady with two boys to be in charge of a Miss Grand Prairie pageant and ladies in bathing suits and competition and everything like that? Was that an unusual role for you, or did you fit right in?
It was a role that I liked very much because I always have believed in the program. I believe in their scholarships and giving the opportunity for the young ladies to do this. So they just kind of thought it was part of my life, and I thought it was part of my life, so it was a real good part of my life.
That's wonderful. When you had your children in schools here in Grand Prairie, Texas, were you into the PTA and a room mother and all of that good stuff? Tell us about your role with your kids.
Yes, I think all the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high school, I was a member of PTA, and I held an office every year, all the time that they went. And I was a homeroom mother many years with the three children.
And took care of the kids when they went to all the Gopher games and ran a taxi and all of the good things.
That's right. And then when my daughter was in high school, we had the booster club for the G-Pets drill team, and so I was president of that organization too. So we had a big time. We kept Johnny and everybody else busy hauling props for whatever he needed to do for the drill team.
Well, Terry is certainly a wonderful asset to you, and as a precious daughter to you. I
Yes,
just
she is.
really do know that. Okay, let's get back to Johnny Jinks. Johnny Jinks, working with the council, working in business, and knowing full well, seeing the history of Grand Prairie past lo these many years since you have been here, what do you think has moved Grand Prairie along, and what do you forecast for the city of Grand Prairie, and tell us how you like it?
Ruthie, I think it's difficult to pinpoint any single thing that has been a prime motivator for Grand Prairie. I think Grand Prairie's location has always been important to it. I think the fact that Grand Prairie is part of a dynamic metroplex also has helped bring Grand Prairie along, and it's caused not only competition for Grand Prairie and competing with other area cities for businesses and jobs and opportunities, but also it has presented a lot of opportunity for Grand Prairie in the way of the dynamic growth that has occurred all throughout the Metroplex. And it's anytime the Metroplex is advertised nationally, Grand Prairie needs to be and usually is part of that advertising. It benefits from it, whether or not it's named in the advertisement or not, it still benefits from that advertising. And I think Grand Prairie will always need to continue to advertise. I think our challenges are probably different today of what they were when I served on the council. We still have a lot of undeveloped land in Grand Prairie. We have expanded a lot of our infrastructure into these areas for development, and that development needs to occur, as you well know, in order to amortize the bonded indebtedness for that infrastructure. But Grand Prairie has a real bright future, but it's a future that I think Grand Prairie will have to play a key role in determining to take advantage, because not only are we located in the center of the Metroplex, but we have limitations as far as our boundaries, and other cities that are on the peripheral area of the Metroplex now do not have some of the problems that we face in expanding. So we must make good use, I think, of the rest of the undeveloped land that we have, being careful to watch our code enforcement and have a nice, clean, attractive city that we can attract new businesses and new residents to. And hopefully, if the home building business revives, then Grand Prairie certainly has a vacuum in that area, I think, in both upgrading some existing housing and to add a lot of new houses in our undeveloped areas. So there are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of challenges ahead.
And a lot of good potential for the electrical contracting business, right, Johnny Jinks?
We hope so.
All right, I would like to ask you, you mentioned that you were chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. At the time, now they call it a chairman, but that you were really the president of a great big group, and when you were the president of the chamber, lots of good things got done, and the chamber really did bounce back and make a good name for itself. Not that it all had not been, but there are ups and downs for the chamber. What was the most exciting thing that you did during your year as really president or chairman of the board of the Chamber of Commerce? And you've worked in that forever, Mr. Highway 161.
Well, of course, we did work on Highway 161, Ruthie. It's always been a pet project of mine, as you well know. I think it's something that Grand Prairie really needs to continue to work on. But also, I had the benefit of a good I inherited a good Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, you did.
A lot of good volunteers. No president ever has a successful chamber year without a lot of good volunteer help, and I really had an abundance of that. And those people worked so hard to bring the chamber to the point it was when we finished that year. But I think seeing the chamber grow in membership, seeing the chamber, leaving the chamber in good, solid financial ground, seeing programs like the Grand Prix, bike ride and so forth, left over to help fund the chamber in future years, all have been kind of key points in that chamber year. The chamber year, as you know, and you have been chamber president as well as I, a chamber year passes so very fast. And you look back and you just wonder where all the time has gone.
Yes.
And there's so much more you'd like to do, but you serve 1 year and it's over. So, but there were just a lot of good memories from chamber work.
Wonderful. Vera, I'd like for you to kind of wind us down a little, look out into your camera and tell us how exciting it is to work 24 hours a day with the man to whom you are married, because you work in business, you have your social life, your wifely life, all of this. And while you're looking out into your camera, I'm going to ask Allison, your granddaughter from Ennis, to come and stand right behind us over here, because we want to get a next generation right behind. Allison, would you like to come and stand right here between your dad and your mom right over here, your grandparents? All right, now tell us what it's like to have wonderful grandchildren like this and yet work in the business and do all of the things that you do, Vera. I think that's important.
Well, I've had 38 wonderful years, because that's how long I've been married to Johnny. And we have been so fortunate to have 3 wonderful children, and they married wonderful people, and now we have these 5 wonderful grandchildren. It's been great.
Right. What is it like now that you have all of this family to come together at Christmas and at Thanksgiving? Is that really a bash?
Oh, it's wonderful. We look forward to these special occasions very much. And we have these big occasions every chance we can get to.
Well, it's wonderful to have Allison on the set with us to help us wind down. And before we leave, we have about a minute left. Johnny, I'd like for you to look out and exhort everyone in Grand Prairie to be good to their city. 1 minute. You can wrap up in a minute.
Well, Ruthie, I do think that it is the responsibility of every citizen, regardless of what their walk in life in that city is, to do the very most they can for the city of Grand Prairie. It's only that way that you get the community effort necessary to propel a city into the kind of place that we all would like for Grand Prairie to be, a place to work and live and play, and to have our investments and to turn over to our families later on. And I would just like to see more people involved in helping Grand Prairie grow to be the city that it can be.
Wonderful. Johnny Jinks, Vera Jinks, and Miss Allison, we're so delighted to have had you for our 151st History Interview. I want to thank you for the time that you have given us today. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we all live and do. Thank you.